Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Wayne, or Wayne Glass Fitness. Today I want to talk about my fitness journey and how it is ever changing and ever evolved over the last several years. So let's flash back to when I was 7 or 8 years old. So this is in 97 and 98. Now I'm almost 30, I'm not 30 yet. I'll be 30 in 27 days, so get excited for a new decade. So growing up, I lived in the South, so Alabama and Florida are places where I grew up. I don't necessarily consider them like quote unquote home, because home is kind of wherever you feel the most welcomed. And while I lived there, I necessarily wasn't always happy to be there, but that's a whole nother conversation. So anyway, so I grew up in the South, Alabama and Florida, as I said, and over time I started to gain weight. I didn't really care about what I was eating. My mom was working a lot, which is obviously no fault to her, so I kind of was left to my own devices about eating and choices about what I ate. I didn't really know what was like good versus like what was bad. So I kind of ate lots of fried foods like McDonald's, and I drank a lot of sweet tea because that's the thing to do in the South. So I started to gain weight, and I think I weighed, I don't know, probably 130, 140 as a 8, 9, 10-year-old, right? So little overweight, right? I'm a short person, so I'm only 5'6", and then I was probably around 5 feet, 5'1", 5'2". So that was not great for my overall health. In addition to being a little overweight, I also was bullied because of my weight and also being perceived to be a gay person. When I was a kid, I was called the F word. I'm not going to say it, but I was called the F word quite often. I didn't really know what that meant. I come to find out it was a derogatory term, and also meant like a bundle of sticks, which is really interesting. I've learned that when I was in 6th grade, so that's something that I've held on to ever since then. But so growing up as a relatively overweight kid, I was bullied for being overweight. I really couldn't do a whole lot of fitness. I couldn't do a lot of things like the physical fitness tests, I think, that they did back in the 90s. I couldn't do a pull-up, and running was really hard for me. So that was not really my bread and butter, my jam, right? I was a gamer, I love video games, I'm super nerdy, and that was where my MO and where I kind of stayed in that lane. But nevertheless, I continued on through elementary and middle school, wasn't really physical active in that regard. I kind of, again, school and video games were my jam. I loved the internet as well. The Sims, I played a lot of that, and other like online games and console games. So I was around probably 14, 15 years old when I decided that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start doing something for my health. I'm gonna start taking ownership of my health, and I did. So the summer of my 8th grade going into 9th grade year, I was visiting my dad in Alabama. My mom and I lived in Florida at the time. Again, my parents are divorced, and they got divorced around 1997. So I went and visited my dad in Alabama, and I was there from probably maybe the end of May, June to the beginning of August time frame. I wanted to spend time with my dad because I don't get to see him very often. But during that time frame, I was like, all right, this is it. This is the time. I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to start working out, and I'm going to start eating differently. I don't want to say better because I don't necessarily know at the time if I actually was eating better, but I was eating differently. And I did. I started to lose weight. I started what I thought I was doing. I was eating better. Like I opted into like lower fat foods or fat-free foods. I had this like preconceived notion that fat was bad. So at the time, I stayed away from peanut butter because it had high fat content, and I stayed away from other foods that were high fat, and I really tried to stick to a low fat diet. But, and as I talked about in my previous video, is that unbeknownst to me, I ended up developing exercise bulimia, and eating disorder, and that really took a toll on my overall mental health. But that summer, I did lose weight. I think going into that summer, I lost, I don't know, probably 30 pounds. I went from 150 to 120, and then I think the lightest I've ever weighed is 118, and which is really light. Like I looked like skin and bones. At the time, I didn't really know that was problematic. I was receiving lots of positive words of affirmation from my friends, my family. I started high school that year, so everyone's like, oh my gosh, you look great, you look great. And I thought I did look great. I thought I had this achievement, and I finally made it, and I was super excited to no longer be heavy, right? Because we live in a society, unfortunately, that praises thin bodies, right? Even for men. Well, maybe more so like muscular these days, but at the time, I guess it felt really good to be a thin person. And also being a queer identified human, but that I didn't necessarily come out as a queer person until much later on. So I'm in my 9th grade year. I wasn't necessarily doing any sports just yet, but I still was exercising on my own, and it was pretty problematic. I exercised when I could, 3, 4, 5 times a day. When high school started, of course I couldn't because I had to go to class, but on the weekends, sometimes I would try to go running, 1 to 2 to 3 times a day, especially after I ate something, which again, I don't recommend, and it's not good, and it's not healthy for the body to continuously exercising after you've eaten to kind of burn off those calories. Don't do that. That's definitely not something I would encourage anyone to do. So my sophomore year of high school, I finally got into running, so I joined cross country and I loved it. It was probably the best thing I've ever done for my life, and I didn't necessarily realize why, and it was because of the community. I loved working out with other people, the encouragement, the motivation, and I loved racing and I loved competing, and I'm a very competitive person, and again, the camaraderie. So I ran cross country and track my sophomore, junior, and senior year, and I loved it. Track was not necessarily my jam. It's so long and it's so boring, and I'm a long distance runner, so I just waited around for 8 hours to do whatever, like a 5-minute race or 11-minute race, depending on if I ran the mile or the 2 mile. Cross country was great. You run for, whatever, 18, 19, 20 minutes and you're done. Now, I wasn't a super fast runner. My PR in a 5K is around 18 minutes, but and my mile time is around 5 minutes, but that was a really long time ago. I think my recent PRs are like 5 something for a mile, and I have no idea for my 5K. It's been a long time. But I did run and I loved it, and that's really where my fitness journey started, was my, going into my freshman year of high school and then throughout high school. So I graduated high school, and then I went to the University of West Florida in Pensacola, where I got into group fitness. Now, I loved it. I loved taking classes. I loved being around people. Spinning was my favorite, or cycling. I loved boot camp, everything. I loved it. It was the first time I've ever been in a structured environment where everyone is having a same shared lived experience of working out, and it was truly life-changing. I became a fitness instructor because, of course, that's what I am, how I am as a person. I find something that I love, and I try to get involved in to make a job or a career out of it. And I did. I was a group fitness instructor from 2009 until 2013, again, the duration of my time in undergrad. And I taught spin classes. Sometimes I would teach yoga. I taught a boot camp class, an abs class, so on and so forth. I loved it. Now, again, during this time, I still was very much struggling with my disordered eating, but I didn't necessarily struggle as much as I did when I was in high school, per se, right? I wasn't trying to work out 6 or 7 times a day like I was in high school, but I still was struggling. And also during this time, I was seeking out counseling and therapy and getting support that I needed. And I finally was exposed to lifting weights. That was something I never did when I was in high school. I didn't want to be bulky. I wanted to be thin, and that's what I thought. I was going to be bulky, but clearly that's not the case. I wanted to be thin. I wanted to be fast. I wanted to be agile, and I didn't want to be heavy, right? Because muscle equals heavy. And then I finally graduated from undergrad in 2013, and then I went on to Iowa State University for grad school. During this time, my group fitness instructor identity took a pause, right? I was in school, that was all I was doing. I was working out at the gym, and it was beautiful amenities in Ames, Iowa. Loved it, it was great, it was beautiful. But I was doing a lot of what I did by myself at the gym, and it wasn't as fun and fulfilling for me. Well, November of 2014, so the fall semester of my second year of grad school, my really good friend Devin, who I went to undergraduate with, ironically, Florida to Iowa, what a small world. And he brought me to a free CrossFit class. It was a Bring a Friend Friday. It was formerly known as CrossFit West Ames. Now I think it's Iridium CrossFit. I think I'm saying that correctly. And I loved it. It was challenging, it was fun. The workout was, I think, running and toes to bar, and there might have been some squatting, I don't remember, but I loved it. And after that, I joined. I was a little nervous because I heard lots of negative things about CrossFit, about injuries, which I'm sure those that watching this video know that, there's the stereotypes with that. And can you get injured? Of course. You can get injured with any sport, but that's again, a whole nother conversation. But so I joined CrossFit. I went through the foundations and the on-ramp, in November of 2014, and I've done it since then. I was finally able to be exposed to a positive, body positive demographic group of people where everyone looked different. They're all doing similar things in different ways, and lifting weights and doing gymnastics and walking on their hands and doing pull-ups and picking up weights and putting them down, and I loved it. It was so liberating. It was something I never thought I would ever do ever. Again, I was a runner, I loved cardio, I was a cardio queen, and that was like where I wanted to stay in that lane. But I did. I started CrossFit. I was in Iowa for, I think, November until May, where I was at that one gym, and then I ended up moving to the Twin Cities to start my full-time job. And I continued on CrossFit there. That was legitimately like one of the first things that I wanted to do when I moved to Minnesota. And I did. I moved to Minnesota on June, I think 6th or 7th, 2015, and I joined a CrossFit gym like this Saturday that I moved there. Like I went to IKEA, I went to Target, and I joined a CrossFit gym. And I was at Timberwolf CrossFit for 5 years prior to moving to New York City. And since then I became a CrossFit coach, where I coached at CrossFit Sabretooth, now Sabretooth Community Fitness, and then I also became a coach at Timberwolf Fitness as well. So I was able to coach at 3 different gyms during my duration of living in the Twin Cities, and it changed my mind, my body, like fundamentally. Like I love lifting. I saw my body composition change. I got stronger. I had biceps, I had bigger glutes and bigger legs, and just like overall like a bigger body, which again, I never thought I ever wanted until I started lifting. And then I lifted and I'm like, wow, this is so liberating. Like picking up barbells and dropping them, I'm like, oh, it just like gets me all tingly on the inside. And I love CrossFit. It's, it has its issues, of course. There was recent scandals with the CEO, Greg Glassman, and his awful racist tweets and him being an awful person, and I'm not a huge fan of him as a person, but now there's a new CEO, and I'm hopeful and optimistic for the organization now. And of course, I 100% respect those organizations that disaffiliated and became fitnesses or community fitnesses or what have you, and no longer have the CrossFit trademark name. So I'm a huge believer of, like, CrossFit is a group of people, it's not one person, and also I recognize that the one person does frame and shape like what an organization is going to look like. But yeah, so that's where we're at. I love working out, and I think it's so important that we do something to move our bodies in meaningful ways. I'm not saying go out and do CrossFit, I'm not saying go out and be an Olympic runner or what have you, but I just want all of us to be able to do something for our bodies that speak to us, whether it's dancing or yoga or weightlifting or HIIT workouts or Pilates or whatever, just something that's fun. I mean, that's the most important thing that we need to do, is to find fun in fitness. I don't want anyone to torture themselves like, oh, I have to do this, or oh, I have to do that, but being able to frame it as like, oh, I get to do that. This is an opportunity and a privilege to make my body feel good, to release endorphins and release stress from the day. So that's all I'm saying. But thank you all so much for listening to my story, and again, coming back to my channel. The videos will look different and evolve over time. I'm still working on the overall logistics of being not really a YouTuber, but using YouTube as a platform to talk about things that are really important to me. But thanks so much for coming. Please be sure to like and subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to connecting more with folks in the future. All right, talk to you later.